Okay, I'm going to talk about how to make glass look realistic and how to render wood realistically in Ashlar-Vellum modeling products. First off, let's take a look at this file when we render it. We can see that the piece of glass on top doesn't look quite right, and the wood looks real striped. Doesn't look like real wood. Let's talk about the glass first. What we have to do to glass is tell the rendering program I want to see through it. By default, most glass materials say I just want to see something that looks like glass on its surface. So we have to go in and tell the program, let's look through it. So I'm going to highlight that piece of glass. I'm going to open Edit Objects, and you'll see in the Material tab there are some checkboxes down towards the bottom, one of which is double-sided facets. If I check that, what that tells the program to do is render the back side of an object as well so we can see through it. I'm going to go ahead and hit apply, and I'll do that rendering, and you can see that it looks a little better, but not much, if any. So the other thing we need to do is we need to come back in here, and in this case that piece of glass is casting a shadow onto this piece of wood beneath it. So I need to come in and turn off Enable Shadow Cast, hit apply. Now when I render it, you'll see that I'm able to see through that piece of glass because it's not casting a shadow on top of the piece of material. Next, what I like to do is that piece of glass by default is just real generic. It might work for some things, but in our case it's a little too bright. So I'm opening up the render library and to come in here to the glass reflective option. Now if you have vellum materials installed, you'll have this additional glass reflective material. And I like to use the soda lime. I'm going to apply that to this material by dragging it on. And the soda lime is a little bit darker. You can see that I still have Enable Shadow Cast off, double-sided checked, so that when I do a render now, it's a darker piece of glass. It does not cast a shadow. I can see through it, and it looks pretty good with this piece of furniture. So now let's go ahead and move on to the wood. Now you can see if I render this, the wood looks striped and doesn't look good at all. So the thing about wood is you have to understand that on most wood materials, it's just an image of a piece of wood essentially being projected onto that piece of solid. So we have to take the projector and we have to move it so that it shines on that piece of, I'll call it wood, at an angle. Okay, so the best way to do that is I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to open Show Hide. I'm going to show only so all the rest of that geometry is out of my way. And I'm going to draw some of what I call helper geometry. I'm going to come down here, the midpoint. And I've drawn these two lines off at a 90-degree angle from the piece of wood. Then what I can do is if I right mouse click this piece of wood, I can come down here to Edit Material. I can also get to that from coming in Edit Objects, Material, Advanced. If I go through Advanced, then every time I make a change, I have to hit the Apply button. And that's one more step that I don't like to do, so I'm just going to use the right mouse click option, Edit Material. When that box comes up, we're going to go into the shader class called Texture Space. In there we have shader types. The one I'm concerned with is Arbitrary Plane. We can change the scale, the aspect ratio, the origin, the normal vector, and the up vector. First off, the scale, as we can see here in the little preview, is way too small. I'm going to start off with something like 12. The aspect ratio is fine. Basically, that material is just a square being projected on here. That's fine. The origin is where the projector is sitting. Now, right now, the projector is straight off the face of this object. I don't want it to be straight off. I want it to be at an angle. So I'm going to come down here and I'm just going to click my cursor on the end of that line. Click. Notice the values changed. The normal vector is which direction is the projector shining? Where is it pointing? So I'll move this out of the way. Try to keep a little in there. And I'm going to click and drag. I'm going to start click here, drag, and I'm going to let my mouse up here. See the values filled in. Okay. Now for the up vector, this is the one that we kind of have to experiment with and see which gives the best results. So first try, I'm going to click and drag out to the end point of this line. And you'll see if I hit update on my screen here, the little sample, I can already tell it's going the wrong way. So I'm going to change my up vector and I'm just going to drag out the Y direction. When I hit update, you could see that I'm starting to get a piece of wood that looks realistic. So I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to come over and I'm going to do a photo render and let's take a look at it. And I think that looks pretty good. Now we could adjust the scale if we wanted to, but for right now, I'm going to keep it like that. And you could see how the wood material is going in at an angle. You can see that on the edge of the piece of wood. That's what we're after because that's what happens inside of a tree. Those rings grow sporadically. Okay, so now that I have that material, there's no point in me having to do this for every piece of wood in the whole project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right mouse click on that piece of wood and I'm going to add material to library. In fact, let me move that over so you can see it. Add material to library. When I do that, I'm going to make a new category and I'm going to call this furniture. And I'm going to call this Mahog Vert because that's a vertical piece of wood. When I hit OK, in my render library, I now have a furniture option. And you can see when I hold my mouse over it, I've got mahogany vertical written up here. Okay, so I can use that later. But what we need to do now is we need to apply that to a horizontal piece of wood. So I'm going to highlight this part and I could either drag this to that part or with this highlighted, I can right mouse click and apply material to selected object. Okay, so I'm going to click on that and do a show only. See what will happen here is when we render that, I don't like the way that this looks going on a horizontal. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did to this. So I'll do a show only. Let's draw another line. Come out the X, then go up the Z, zoom out, right mouse click that part, edit material, and move that up so you can see it, edit material. Okay, now we've already applied that mahogany to it. All we need to do is just change how it's oriented. So I'll go back into texture space, arbitrary plane, my scale is fine, my aspect ratio is fine. I'm going to change the origin to be this endpoint. The normal, I'm going to click and drag, let up at that endpoint. The up, since it worked going this way last time along the Y, I'm going to go along the Y again. If I update, might not have seen what happened, but we did have a change. Hit OK. Let's do a rendering. So I think that looks much better. So if I do a show all, now I'm going to right mouse click that piece of wood. I'm going to add material to library. Furniture, I'm going to call it Mahog. Horizontal. Hit OK. And it takes a minute to add it to the library. Once it's there, you can see I have a vertical and a horizontal.